Welcome to Season 2 of the Pivot Point Podcast. This season, we are featuring candid conversations. We're interviewing industry experts and leaders about candid conversations they've had that involve gender in some way. They're going to fill us in on what happened, what prevented them from addressing it, the risks they took in that conversation, why they chose to say something, and how they handled it, and what happened next. Stay tuned for Pivotal Stories, a Positive Change. Joining me in the studio, I have Jeff Ton, author of Apply Your Value, Leading IT with Strategic Vision. He has also written hundreds of blog posts about technology and technology leadership. His posts have appeared on Forbes, CSO Online, People Development Magazine, Intel's IT Peer Network, and his very own riversofthought.net. Throughout his career in business, Jeff has developed and fine-tuned his leadership skills to become a leadership-focused leader who drives results. He brings a strategic view of business and identifies innovative approaches to achieve business objectives by leveraging technology where and when appropriate. Adept at building and leading teams, both inline and cross-functional, he has been a catalyst for change across the businesses he has served. Well, thanks for being with us, Jeff.
Oh, my pleasure. Happy to be here, Julie.
Well, I understand, as we're doing on Season 2, that you have a candid conversation. In fact, Jeff is an overachiever. He has two candid conversations he's going to share with us today. He couldn't decide on which, and they pair so beautifully together. So we're going to go with both of them today. So Jeff, please share.
Oh, absolutely. So I've got it. I guess it's more like a before and after story. So we'll start with the before story. And this was, probably over 15 years ago, very early in my career. There was a staff dinner that I was hosting, and as it turned out, of the 25 people on my staff, only one female was able to attend the dinner. So the dinner's going on, and there were some jokes, some innuendos that were in my mind, kind of bumping up on the line, right? Just really not crossing the line, but bumping up against it. So the dinner goes on, and the conversation finally did cross the line, and I kind of put a halt to it. What I learned later was my line was different than the female that was there with us. And the conversation had long crossed the line. And in fact, she was pretty devastated that the conversation went on that way, and devastated that I did nothing earlier in the meeting, or earlier in the dinner rather, to put a stop to it. So that really has changed a lot about the way I manage, about the way I lead teams. It was a real learning experience for me. So if you fast forward several years, I was sitting in my office one day, and one of my team members came in and sat down and shut the door. And he said to me, "Jeff, you have a hostile work environment here. You could have knocked me over." That would have been the last thing that I would ever expect anyone to come in and tell me. Because I had done so much to try to make sure that everyone felt welcome, everyone, regardless of race, of gender, of faith background, felt welcome. But yet here was this person telling me this, and he looked at me and said, "Jeff, I'm gay, and there's been a lot of jokes and banter throughout the office about homosexuals. Wow. And it really has turned into a hostile work environment." So I asked him to give me a few days to think about it and think how we would address it. And what I ended up doing was hitting it head on. It just so happens that a few days later was supposed to be one of my quarterly staff meetings. And so everybody was going to be gathered together. I brought the VP of HR and had given her a heads up on what my intent was for the meeting.
Mm.
And also coincidentally, it was April 1st, so April Fool's Day. So I started the meeting with an opening monologue that would make pretty much anybody blush. And
Everyone feels uncomfortable.
And everybody feel uncomfortable. I think I insulted everybody in the room by the time I got done. And what was kind of interesting was, the first joke I told, everybody laughed. Then there was less laughter. Then there was less laughter. And finally, towards the end, I think people were getting the point.
Yeah.
Because by the time I got there, there was no laughter. And then I turned it over to the VP of HR, and she led the group in training on how to create a work environment that is much more open and welcoming to everyone. So I guess that's my before and after story, Julie.
Oh, yeah, Jeff. Well, a few learning nuggets for listeners that I love is that, hey, we're not always going to get it perfect the first time. You used it as a learning opportunity to grow as a leader early in your career. You didn't address conflict. And as many leaders I work with don't address conflict proactively. They wait until it lingers, it gets swept under the rug, and then it becomes so uncomfortable that you have to do something, and it's a knee-jerk reaction that feels awful to everybody. So you were bumping up against that line, right? And you realized that line was different for her, and that perception of the line versus what it was like to be the only woman, which is a very different position to be in. And I think very hard for many men to even understand what it feels like to be the only one in the room.
Yes.
Ironically, a story you shared in the Research for One, our book on allies.
That's right.
You don't even know what it's like. I mean, how would we even expect men to understand what it's like? However, to be curious about yourself in her position and realize my line was here, her line was here. Wow. I was off, right? Her perception was different than mine, and I have to do something to fix it. So, your fast forward story of what I would call your ally journey today, when conflict bubbles up and you're given that candid feedback from your employee, you do something about it. And it doesn't mean knee jerk, right? You didn't do it right then. You didn't go down and yell at everybody that same day.
Right.
You asked for some type of process. You put together a plan. You put people in the room and you got their attention, I'm sure.
Yes.
Especially knowing you and your character that is so off character for you to tell jokes like that. I imagine they're just like, oh, wow, where is this going? And you got their attention of this is not okay. And I like how, making everybody feel a little bit uncomfortable. I often find that through growth, discomfort is a prerequisite, that we have to feel a bit uncomfortable, because otherwise, why change just for change's sake? That usually does not motivate people. So you have to experience some discomfort to want to change, and you have to understand the impact of that negative behavior, which you so eloquently did in that monologue.
Yeah, I heard later that someone walking down the hall had overheard some of that and thought, oh my God, what is Ton doing now?
I bet. Hysterical. Well, and it was April Fool's, right? So you could play into that.
Yes.
And partner with a business partner, a people person, a diversity person, HR person, whoever you have inside your organization, listeners, they can be your partner. You don't have to go at this alone as a leader. And if you don't have one of those people, partner with another leader or someone on your team that's passionate about this, because it can be awfully lonely having to address, having these candid conversations publicly on your own. So you've got support around you. Ask for help. So excellent, Jeff. Well, okay. So a couple things. So Jeff's story is featured in our book, One, How Male Allies Support Women for Gender Equality, which I won't revisit again because it's another candid conversation that you led so beautifully. And I think that's one of the attributes you speak beautifully about in a lot of the work that you do, connecting CIOs here in the area and bringing, diversity into that conversation, which is traditionally not so diverse. So I'm curious about a couple things for our listeners. Your book, when did you decide to write it? What's that journey been like? And then 2, how does that impact you as a leader? Think about all these things with diversity and in your work to promote and bring other people into the conversation. I want to also hear about that. But first, tell us about your journey with your book.
Well, it's probably something that I've always wanted to do. I've probably started and stopped a half a dozen books in the last 10 or 15 years. But last fall, I read a book by Honore Corder, and it was called You Must Write a Book. And she lays out this the reasons why someone should write a book. And not only does she lay out the reasons, but she lays out a process, a framework, if you will, that enables you to do it. And go figure, an IT person that needed a process to follow, to get something done. So I followed the process that Honore lays out in that book. And lo and behold, here we are 7.5 or 8 months later, and the book actually is coming out today, the day we're recording this. So it's been a real exciting process. As an author, it's also a scary process. You're putting yourself out there. You're putting your ideas out there for people to read and look to, and that can be kind of intimidating. But I think for me, it's also helped me crystallize some of the things that I learned during my tenure as CIO, and put some of the pieces together in how this whole leadership thing works. And I think one of the cool things that came out of the book was I was focused on leading IT with strategic vision, right? That's the subtitle to the book. But if you look at it, it's really not about IT at all. It's about how to lead any department or any company with strategic vision, and how to put those pieces together so that everybody understands and is part of the vision, and then understands how the strategies build under that vision. So it's really turned into something a little broader, not intentionally. It's still, it's still about IT, but there's other leadership lessons in there as well.
Right. I love that. And the book, again, is Amplify Your Value, Leading IT with Strategic Vision. So you're right. I mean, rarely is something like strategy and vision in IT just about that, right? It's about how you lead your team and this whole undercurrent of leadership and the lessons you learned along the way. I was so thrilled to provide a testimonial because I think it's a very necessary read for people, especially in industries that they feel are different or misunderstood. And I in working with IT professionals, it's obviously usually very male dominated. And when I work with men, they'll tell me, like, I feel like no one gets what I do inside the organization, or no one appreciates it. And so what I think you do is give a voice to that of how it connects to the overall vision, and how we need leaders and we need voices inside the organization in areas where we traditionally don't highlight or put the spotlight on.
Right.
And that leads me to the second question, Jeff. Being a proponent of leadership and, being very active in our technology community and leadership. And I know one that you're willing to stick your neck out in a lot of diversity issues and have uncomfortable conversations. When I got to speak to CIO Network last fall, I mean, you could just cut the tension with a knife on something like gender equality, because there's not that much diversity. So yes. I'm curious, from your perspective, what does it matter? We know, you and I know all this thought leadership on diversity and higher performing teams, but why does it really matter from your perspective?
Well, I think it matters on so many levels. First of all, you get the diversity of thought. No two people, no two genders, whatever the diversity realm you're talking about, approach a problem in the same way, or approach life in the same way. And so you get, at a personal level, you get so many different perspectives on how to attack a problem, how to handle a situation, and that makes you stronger and smarter. Then you look at it from a business level, and Melissa Greenwell, in her book, Money on the Table, was laid out a fantastic business case that shows that companies that are more diverse make more money. They're more profitable.
Yep.
And so if it's just purely from a business sense, there's your business case right there.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I strive to do with the NDCIO network is bring in that diversity of thought, that diversity of perspective, whether it's through the membership or whether it's through guest facilitators like yourself that bring a different perspective to open the minds, and it gives you the ability to look at a problem from a different point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. Problem solving, when you get people in a room together that look the same, think the same, have the same backgrounds, wow, you're going to get the same idea, right? You're not going to have that group think mentality, which is just so hard to break down the barriers to that unless you invite diverse perspectives. So you get that diverse thinking, more diverse decisions that in the end have the business case of making more money. Yeah, I often find when we lead with that message, you're leaving money on the table, that you have 21% higher profitability in McKinsey's latest study. This data has been around for 12 years.
It's a long time. Yeah.
It hasn't changed. And what they're showing in their latest report is, in fact, it's quite stagnant, the growth that's happening with women in leadership. So I'm always curious as, it is business, right? It comes down to business and dollars, but the underlying motivation to step into that more challenging conversation, disruptive conversation that I know you're leading actively. How do you get over that initial discomfort, though, of, hey, I'm going to bring in a diversity speaker, or hey, we're going to talk about this. What do you do to prep for that?
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer.
Well, so much of it is who you are as a leader is kind of, this is how you lead. But, I guess for listeners out there, what would you offer if it's like, whoa, that sounds great, but I'm not Jeff?
Well, but I think part of it is understanding your own strengths and weaknesses, and where, what things you can speak to with strength and what things you need an outside perspective on, and then putting yourself out there. I learned a long time ago, in order to achieve the things that I wanted to achieve, I was going to have to put myself out there. It's part of why I run the NDCIO network. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. I probably learn more from that group than I do from any single other thing that I do.
Yep.
And it's that, it's the diversity of thought from different sizes of organizations. It's the people coming at problems from different angles. But it is scary. It's scary. We were talking earlier. It's scary to write a book and put it out there. Yep. Because you're putting yourself, you're exposing yourself, right? It's being vulnerable when it comes right down to it. To be a good leader, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be real. People have to understand who you are, and what your strengths and weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's so authentic. And yeah, the vulnerability piece is, I think, very scary for a lot of men, especially because the wrapper of masculinity that we put around what it means to be a man, especially in our country.
Yes.
You can look to examples everywhere of poor masculine examples when it's overemphasized. And so to choose to be vulnerable, that's a part of being a leader, and that's a part of being self-aware, knowing where I'm strong, knowing where I'm not so good. As hard as I may try, I need an outside perspective, or I would even offer, I need an ally, right? I need somebody that can help me with that. And I don't have to have all of the answers. And it's okay to say, I don't know. Or it's okay to say, hey, this is scary, or this is uncomfortable. Just say it, because everyone's feeling it. And so to step out, and you lift the rest of the team around you, because they see, well, it's safe for Jeff to do that. I guess it's okay if I do that too. And so just model that on a daily basis as a leader. You show them what good looks like. So excellent, Jeff. This has been so fantastic to talk with you today. It's a conversation revisiting a year later from our research in the book. Yeah. It's so fun to see your evolution as a leader, the work you're doing to support diversity, and the excellent book, Amplify Your Value. I'm sure will be a game changer for many IT leaders and organizations. So thank you for all you do to support equality.
Thank you for having me on your program today, Julie. It's been fun.
And last thing before you leave, I know you are not a self-promoter, but I do want you to self-promote. How can our listeners stay in touch with you? Besides from the book, which is available on Amazon, Amplify Your Value, how else is the best way to follow you?
So my personal blog is riversofthought.net. And you can follow the blog. You can sign up for my email newsletter there on the blog page. And that'll give you insight into the many things that I write about in my blogs, but it will also give you ideas about the book, where you can find it, speaking appearances that I'll be making if you want to hear me speak. All those kinds of things are available at riversofthought.net.
Excellent, Jeff. Well, thanks for being with us today. We appreciate your leadership. In our studio today, we have Nicole Jansen. And over the past 30 years, she has coached and trained thousands of leaders to transform their lives and achieve extraordinary results in business. In her view, there is nothing better than seeing people excel and live their best life, particularly when they are elevating others at the same time. Applying her unique blend of business mentorship and personal mastery, Nicole's clients not only experience a substantial increase in sales, team performance, and profitability, they also experience greater confidence, clarity, and personal authenticity through discovering and playing to their strengths. She's a certified human behavior specialist, business breakthrough coach, strategic intervention coach, and the founder of Discover the Edge and the Leaders of Transformation podcast and community. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you, Julie. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, we understand you have a candid conversation you would like to share with our listeners. Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned in my bio about working with a lot of leaders and entrepreneurs. I started my career very early on in my teens. My parents were entrepreneurs, and so I just kind of dove in early on working with them and also starting my own business. And one of the things I did when I first started was I was doing B2B sales. So I knew business was pretty simple in the sense that, or at least I thought at that time, it was like pretty simple. Find a product, find somebody who wants to buy it, create a margin in there, and I can make money, and off we go. And so that's really what I did at a very simple level. And what that did and how this relates to that candid conversation was that I ended up meeting with a lot of interesting people at a very young age. And if you can imagine being a young woman in business, and I'm talking about 16, 17, 18 years old, even in my early 20s, and going in and doing a sales presentation to sell a piece of technology. I've done various things, so incentive programs and the like. And so this one particular time, and I learned very early on that people weren't going to take me seriously if I didn't present myself in a certain way. And so, and I had a lot of guys that were like, God bless them, but they just were like, oh, so sweet, honey, why don't I take you for dinner and, we'll discuss this over a few drinks afterwards. And I'm like, really? I can't believe this is happening, right? They're not taking me seriously. Why are they not taking me seriously? Mm-hmm. Well, I was about 23, 24. One in particular got pretty rough. I had a guy who was interested in buying a number of these air filtration units for his building. And so I scheduled an appointment to meet with him. And we get into the conversation. I'm explaining it. All sounds good. And then he says, and then he sets it aside. And he says, let me just say, there's what the problem with you is. And I said, okay, that's an interesting way to change the conversation.
Love that feedback.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. And he says, the problem with you is that you don't realize that women are only good for one thing.
Oh.
And I mean, it doesn't get much worse than that, right? In terms of prejudice, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. So I was like, really? Anyway, so it got worse, and and he got fairly descriptive, and one of the things in that moment, and I thought to myself, I'm like, what am I doing here, and how do I handle this? Like, how did I get here? What did I miss the signals to get here to have a conversation with this person? And then how do I handle it? And I know that one of the things that you ask in your questions is, how did you handle it? Did you handle it? And in that moment, there was nobody else around in the office. And I thought to myself, and I was like, well, Nicole, do you want to be right? Or do you want to be safe? Do you want, in the sense of safety, like my own personal physical safety, because I was feeling very unsafe in that moment. And so I chose to walk out. of that room and not address that conversation. But what I learned in that process is, number one, there are some battles that you just don't even want to bother fighting. And most people, your listeners, are probably not going to experience it quite like that. Mm-hmm. But the lesson is that, number one, sometimes we want to make a point, and especially as women right now are looking to be heard, is sometimes we've got to take into consideration the situation, how much it's worth. Right. Mm-hmm. So I walked out of there and he was like, "Oh, I'll buy your product or whatever." But I thought, you know what? I don't even want to do business with you. Mm-hmm. So there was a choice of also, who do I want to do business with? And I learned at that point that, you know what? I need to qualify my prospects better. Mm-hmm. And so safety, do I want to be right or do I want to be, so the old saying, do you want to be right or do you want to be rich? It's like, do you want to be right or do you want to be safe and move on? And what it also taught me is that, you know what, rather than get bitter at all the men who, and there are some wonderful men that I've been in business with and done business with and collaborated with, certainly. But, there are those that, that have that view, that I would prefer not to work with. So let's just say, but the ones that I've met over the years, and rather than getting, or that didn't take me seriously, rather than getting bitter about it, I thought, okay, I'm going to beat you at your own game. What do I need to learn? How do I need, and not beat you in a competitive, but it was just really, it's like, I needed to get better. I could get bitter or I could get better. And what I ended up doing is I ended up getting better and stronger and wiser. And so it got to the point where I was about 26 years old, that sometimes, because I was still young and they're like, what does this person know? Why would I be listening to this person? But as soon as I opened up my mouth, number one, I carried myself with confidence and I was dressed, professionally. And then when I opened my mouth and they went, oh, she knows what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. Everything changed. And so I actually used that. And it wasn't just one conversation that happened to be the worst one, but there was a number of different scenarios that I went through. And I looked at that and I said, you know what, I can learn from this. What is it going to take for me to win at this game, the male world, which is about getting results? Yep. And so I learned how to get results and to do it in an honest and, integral way. And as a result of that, now I coach entrepreneurs. I've worked with many different leaders, like you said, teams and so forth. And I know how to get results. And when I bring it, and so I look at it like drive and flow. So the masculine energy is that results-based, drive the results. And then there's the feminine energy, which is the flow. It's the collaboration, it's the connection, it's the nurture. And so what I've learned to do, and it's over the years have felt been out of balance, right, in different ways, but learning what is that balance, right? It was a learning process to know how those go together, where I can blend drive and flow. Mm-hmm. And as I've been able to do that, that's, and I think I know we all have masculine energy and feminine energy in us. Even like some of the most amazing men that I've worked with have this feminine energy that they know how to bring that in, that empathy and compassion and collaboration and so forth. So so through a negative situation, I was able to go, what can I learn from this? Rather than get better, what can I learn from this and how can I get better in the process? Mm-hmm.
I love these reflection questions, Nicole. These are great for our listeners because, we find, especially in a Me Too era, that a lot of people do have stories like this. And while there's negative stories as well as so many positive stories of growth and support, and like you said, allies being supportive and empathetic, there are some of these things that happen. And I find many more times than not, women have a story like this. And I love how you choose to help you pivot to the next level. You made a choice about what can I learn from this. I love how you learned how to qualify leads from this, an important lesson in your business that serves you well today. Who do I want to do business with? And then this whole drive and flow aspect that you outline here, masculine and feminine energy, we also call it the yin to the yang that we have.
Yes.
And we often do have some balance within ourselves. I find very rarely that people are completely masculine or completely feminine. And the energy, when you can balance it between two people, two leaders, a leadership team especially, wow, you can really take an organization, a relationship, a business to the next level, balancing that drive and flow. So I think you speak to the good things that can come from having a candid conversation.
Yes.
Balancing your own considerations along the way and helping that help you be better. So I want to make sure we talk about the leaders of transformation, the great work you do with the podcast and your community. I had the opportunity to be on this summer, and it was just such a great experience for me to share our story. I'm curious, from your seat in the bleachers, coaching, supporting, working with leaders that are transforming and growing. Diversity is important, right? We know all about these great business results associated with high-performing teams and diverse teams. What do you see? Like, if you were to speak to maybe more of the scenarios you see play out, the tangible business results, the emotional pieces of this, the synergies that happen on a team, what do you think are the benefits of leaders really taking diversity and gender diversity seriously?
Well, it's funny because I actually have been teaching personality dynamics for many, many years and using it as a tool. I learned it in my early teens, about 11, 12 years old. I learned personality dynamics. So understanding and appreciating the different personality types. And similarly, I think it's the teams that do that are the most successful, that have the most, they're the most balanced and enjoy the most innovation and growth, are ones that actually are willing to hear different viewpoints. So similar, like I said, with the personalities, it's like we oftentimes think, well, why can't they be normal like me? Why can't they think like me? Why can't they do that like me? And we get frustrated with other people because they're not doing what we think they should be doing. And of course, it's like, who are we to be deciding what they should be doing and how they should be doing it? And so, but when I have this saying, I say, choose fascination over frustration, choose curiosity over criticism. So if you don't understand a viewpoint, is to get curious about it and saying, okay, tell me more. And so teams that are willing to, it's much more than just numbers, right? Oh, we need to have this many men, this many women, this many, different ethnicities and so forth. It's more than that. It's actually a mindset to say, we want to have different viewpoints coming into the picture, because if we only have a few viewpoints, we're seeing the world through that small, like that little fishbowl, right? Yep. We're seeing it through that, and we're missing out. Actually, it's funny with my podcast. When I launched it, I had someone, and I was living in LA. I had someone who said to me, "You can get 1 million listeners. Don't worry about the rest of the world. Just get 1 million listeners out of LA alone." And I said, well, that's all lovely to think, I could have 1 million listeners from LA, but I'm talking about leaders of transformation. I'm talking about transforming the way people see themselves, the way they see others, and the way they see the world around them. This is a global conversation. Yep. And not everybody thinks, thank God, not everybody thinks like we think in LA, or that the people in LA think. And of course, I'm from Canada, so I get that, and so there's different, everybody has different viewpoints. And so I wanted that. And actually, in a way, it seemed like in the beginning that it actually was a slower process to grow my podcast, because I was going wide. And, and I've got listeners in 100 different countries. And so you're reaching a wider audience, but more spread out. And so from a strategy standpoint, oftentimes that's not the strategy. You want to go like tight niche, right? And focus in. But what it has done is it's allowed me to have that, to bring through the podcast, to bring diverse viewpoints. So now you can get a much wider perspective, and the long-term result of that is far greater than I could have ever had having a bunch of people in LA saying, yeah, this is the way the world works.
I love what you said, that when we have people that think similarly and have similar viewpoints and backgrounds, it's like a fishbowl. Like you're just seeing it through this one little itty bitty lens that's very likely not to be representative of your consumer base, the people you want to do business with, or the people that you want to be drawn to you. So widening that lens, and diversity goes way beyond gender and race. I think those are the two things we see, so we can assume a diversity just by looking, but it goes much deeper.
Yes.
It's thought patterns, it's personality styles, it's where you grew up. To your point about geography, right? Having different nationalities at the table, or people, different regions of thinking, rural versus urban. There's just so many wrinkles that you could throw into the diversity bucket beyond just the way people show up and look.
Yes.
But with diversity brings those wider perspectives, and to see your podcast grow into now 100 countries, you can certainly speak to the success long-term. And it is a longer-term journey. It's not instant, the diversity results I find. And I think that's why in today's short-term focused world, there just isn't as much emphasis, even though we know in the long run it's the right thing to do and the best thing to do. So, Nicole, I'd love for you to continue and share maybe your podcast journey, how our listeners can continue to follow you on the podcast and beyond.
Sure. And I love what you said there about it's so much more. And that is absolutely my point, is that it's so much more than gender and, or, your the color of your skin or whatever. It is really, it is a mindset. It is a culture that you build. And yes, it does take longer, perhaps in the beginning, because you got to figure out how to work together.
Yep.
Right. And once you figure it out and you can respect and value and bring everybody's ideas to the table, oh my gosh, what an incredible, those are the teams that long term, like you said, it's a long-term game. Those are the ones that win. So in terms of my podcast, leadersoftransformation.com is the website. And we've got your episode, all the other episodes are up there. And I really, as I said, it's interesting, because even as I'm intentional and wanting to get different people on the show, and I've had people say, oh, you need more of this or more of that, and they're really thinking about gender. You got to make sure you balance the gender or balance the color of their skin. And I'm thinking, you know what? There's so much more than that. That's part of it. It absolutely is part of it. But there's so much more than that. And what I love doing is I love pulling out the distinctions. And I'm a big believer in helping people to play to their strengths. And so everybody brings something different, something unique. And if you can bring that out and shed light on that, you've got this different viewpoint. And even if we have the same, you and I, same gender, same color of skin, all of that, when you come down to experience, we might even have the same set of strengths. We might even have the same passion, let's say, for leadership. But when you get to experience, that's why in my coaching, I talk about blending the sweet spot where you are doing what you love, what you're great at, and bringing in these experiences, so it's passion, strengths, and experience. Experiences, all our experiences are different. And so when you get to that, there's so much richness and so much diversity in that conversation, if we will take the time to listen to each other. So,
Nicole, that's so beautiful. And I love broadening the term diversity to talk about experiences. And that's really what we're trying to do on this podcast. Yes, we do want to balance gender, since we're talking specifically about gender. However, what I've tried to do is get a broad swath of people that, to your point, have different backgrounds, experiences that have led them to think differently. And we're all kind of a product of the experiences we've had, and the experiences that we endure, and the experience that we continue to drive towards. We probably on the surface look a lot the same, have a lot in common as coaches and speakers and podcasters. However, I bet our experiences are vastly different. And so, thinking about widening your lens, I think what I'd leave our listeners with today from this conversation is think about the people you spend a lot of time with in your life personally and professionally. How can you widen it so that you're seeking out and bringing others into your tribe that have different experiences that you do? Because those are the people you're going to learn from. Those are the people you're going to grow with. Those are the people you probably want to do more business with or have in your professional setting for your decisions that you make. And it's harder because you have different viewpoints, and there's a little bit of debate. And I would argue that's very healthy for teams to have that debate, because in the long run, something very beautiful comes from that debate. And especially, like you said, really choosing fascination over frustration, being curious, I find is a lot of what our allies do, is they're legitimately curious and want to learn from others that are different than them. So Nicole, thank you so much for being on today. Just in wrapping up, could you share, leadersoftransformation.com is where you can get into the community and access the podcast. How else can our listeners follow you?
So I've got another website, which is discovertheedge.com. That's my coaching website. And certainly on social media, I'm all over social media. So LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. Certainly you can find me there at Nicole Jansen, or through Leaders of Transformation or Discover the Edge. So lots of ways to find me and can follow me.
Awesome. Well,
and I'm very accessible. So I'm also, I should say, I'm very accessible. So if you reach out to me, I respond to all my own messages. And I find that very important because I do want to hear people's viewpoints. I want to hear the feedback and connect with people personally. So that's why I do what I do.
Awesome, Nicole. Well, thanks for sharing your story with us and your candid conversation today. Thank you for listening to the Pivot Point podcast and our candid conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to share it with a friend or subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us at Next Pivot Point on social media, and check out our website for free, amazing resources to support your candid conversation journey. It's www.nextpivotpoint.com. Thank you.